Okay, welcome everybody. This is the first real week of the Tennessee Scipreneur Challenge for 2022. We're going to be jumping right into talking about the entrepreneurship area and all the skills that we'll be discussing over the next several weeks. This first part is kind of a light toe dipping into the entrepreneurship world, just kind of figure out, if you're thinking along the same lines as I do as far as entrepreneurship goes. We know that not everyone in this audience is going to be an entrepreneur, right? You're still going to be scientists, but being a scientist and a researcher and an IP holder and an entrepreneur and a founder are a great mix. And I know several of those have been highly successful in that world. So, it's not about just what you do, it's about what you can do with all the stuff that you have. And I think putting things in the market that y'all are developing is a great opportunity for us, Memphis, yourselves, and everything else. And that's what we're hoping to get through this process, is get you a little bit further down the road of understanding what a business plan is around your concepts, and then how to launch that in the market. And after this program, after this cohort, we'll help all those teams that want to continue that process and keep pushing the envelope to get that product to market. So, all right, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So first of all, I was going to do this kind of team reveal. I don't think everybody's here, but so just real quickly, I said you don't have to turn on videos, but if you can, I want everybody to either use the little hand raise icon or turn on your video for team number one. Say hello, do something. There we go. Anna, okay. Yep, so Cody, team number one. Awesome, awesome. All right, team number two. Okay, say hello.
Hi, we are here.
Hi. All right, and team number three. Perfect. So we at least have a couple of people from each team. I think that's great. You're going to have one or two more individuals on your team, plus the IP holder to help you through this whole process. So as we gather everyone together and get into this thing, I'm sure we'll have some more people join us in a minute. Okay. All right. Any questions before we get started?
Yeah, so I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I have been invited this night.
Yes.
Instead of like Scotland, and I don't know actually which team I am.
I don't have my email up. Shelby, were you included on that email that?
No, I've been invited just this night. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you chat with Alessandro on the side through the chat and tell him which team he's going to be on?
Yeah, I'll take
tonight. It doesn't really matter what team you're on tonight, because we're going to be talking about a lot of general stuff. We went over the IP last week, and you can have some time with your team in doing that. But Shelby's going to connect the dots for you on the back end.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Okay, so this is what we're going to go over this week. Just some basics about entrepreneurship. We're going to talk a little bit about design thinking. I'm going to challenge you in the way you're thinking about how creative you may or may not be, or may not think you are, and kind of hopefully blow your mind a little bit in the concept there. We're going to go over our first set of tools called the Idea Discovery Canvas, and this is what you'll utilize throughout this entire program to help you flesh out your ideas in a variety of different segments of this canvas. That'll help you come up with an overall visual business plan, and it will help you tremendously when it comes to filling out the deck that we showed a couple of weeks ago, and that we'll give you access to after this class. We'll go into market identification, just kind of talking about product market fit and discovering that space. Then problem framing. So the best way to get started is to kind of understand what the problem is. A lot of y'all, each one of your IPs, you kind of have a solution, right? And we got to make sure, even though you have that target of what you want to do and deliver to a certain customer, we call it the beachhead. We need to make sure that you understand what that beachhead is and all the influencers and decision makers that might be in that space, who you're actually providing value to or receiving value from, whose pains you're alleviating along the way. We'll talk about pains and gains and how those are the main parts of value propositions. You have to be able to frame out that problem in order to make sure your solution is a good fit. So you might have a solution in mind. A lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs come in mind with the solution, and then they have to kind of find a product. And that's a difficult time if they don't know how to actually get in there and discover the problem and start framing it out to match up with their solution. And you'll be surprised how many times solutions pivot. And that's when that word really comes into play quite a bit. Once they've framed out the problem and they already had the solution, now they got to figure out how to retrofit the solution to fit the problem that's actually going to be most viable and generate the most opportunity for revenue. We'll do a little bit of pitch deck review, and then we'll go over the homework. So when we went over the pitch deck a couple weeks ago, so I'm just going to breeze through that real quickly and then show you where it is for y'all to find that. All right, so are you an entrepreneur? This is a question that I ask everybody that I generally interface with, and it's not to challenge anyone, it's to more inspire or to at least give everyone the understanding of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Any single person can be an entrepreneur. There's not a person on this planet that I don't believe could be an entrepreneur. How good of an entrepreneur? That depends on how much they're going to sharpen their skills and claim and earn those skills and techniques in order to be successful, and how much work they're going to put into it. It's much like a professional athlete. I mean, you have to put in the work, and more work than anyone else, in order to make the show. So this is the same thing. We just call the show the market in this case. So entrepreneurs walk any form of life, right? And there's not really a box that an entrepreneur fits in. In fact, they only fit in their own shaped boxes that they make for themselves, is a good way to think about it. An entrepreneur is someone who generally wants to work more than the average person on the things that they're passionate about and pretty much nothing else. I know that's kind of been my case, but when I say nothing else, it's pretty much what I'm saying is I want to focus on a set of customers and deliver a solution to them that they're going to appreciate, right? That's who I want to focus on, not necessarily everybody's whiz bang idea on stuff like that. So it's somebody who's going to be generally very focused and dedicated on their passions. It's someone who, and I've always said this, I'd much rather work 100 hours a week as an entrepreneur than work 40 hours as a full-time employee somewhere. And there's no judgment there for others and everyone else that likes to do that and finds a lot of stability in that. In my area, instability is not something that I generally am afraid of. Do I suffer from an instability quite often? Yeah. I mean, surely between businesses, sometimes the businesses succeed, sometimes the businesses fail. My last one was a great story, and I'll share that with you sometime during this process of a failure. I talk about it all the time because it was such a learning lesson to me that I know my next adventure into that space is going to be significantly more successful from what I learned. So entrepreneurs are just kind of a unique individual, but I do think anyone can step into that. And I do think a lot of times society and things that change in society push people into that. We have a lot of people starting businesses right now because they're leaving their jobs where they weren't appreciated. They've had this idea and this passion. They're opening up ice cream stores and bakeries and all these different things. And these are all founders. Are they going to go 10X and build a unicorn business? Probably not. Are they going to go franchise? Maybe. So you never know how far and extended you can actually take your idea until you get into the space and understand what it takes. But that is a lot of energy. That is also a lot of emotional heartbreak. So, you know, I'm sure everybody knows the emotional damage meme that's going around for a while, right? It's a lot of emotional damage that comes with being an entrepreneur as well, but it's a lot of reward that comes with that risk. And there's just a tremendous amount of feeling of impact when you've delivered something to a customer that really appreciates it. And in this space, when we're talking about either, you know, smart agriculture that's going to help us grow crops without parasites and a variety of things eating them before they even get to the table, or you're talking about life-saving medicines or devices that are helping in life-saving treatments and diagnoses. These are all things that you can look at and go, wow, that was a hellacious amount of work that I put in, but my impact to a customer segmentation is incredibly rewarding. So that's kind of what an entrepreneur, you know, how I see it, and the ways that I feel like someone should kind of approach it, understanding the kind of jumping off the cliff type thing here, but it's also like a really rewarding type thing. I think last week we put up a quote there about the entrepreneur is someone who jumps off the cliff and builds themselves a parachute on the way down or an elevator on the way down, right? They just kind of figure it out. So some considerations, you know, look at your personality. I put this up there about extrovert versus introvert. It's not an either or. I have had very successful colleagues that are the most introverted people that you'll ever meet, and they've been very successful entrepreneurs. I do think it's better when there's kind of a mix between introversion and extroversion, just to kind of understand, you know, that you're going to have to put yourself out there. But in this process, when we kind of challenge your thinking and challenge you to go and discover more about your product and get to know customers about it, you will understand that breaking out of that introverted kind of shell space is not it's not a bad thing. You can kind of get into that space and get the information you want and then plug back out of it and get back to your safe space. It's just a momentary kind of 30 seconds of putting yourself out there to find out some valuable information that you really would need to know about your product. Motivation, I mean, return on energy, right? A lot of people are looking for this return on energy of I'm going to put a lot in and I expect a lot out. Work-life balance, that's sometimes a hard thing to do, but I will be willing to put some money on the line here that generally entrepreneurs figure out a way to have work-life balance that other people can't, right? There's less structure in your life, less structure in your day, and you fit in those little areas of time for your family and everything else. And generally, when you're an entrepreneur, you have a family that's adjusted to your lifestyle more than anything else. So things do become balanced in that regard. A lot of perseverance, a lot of energy. I'm gonna skip this one because I'm gonna come back to it. Looking over to the right there, a lot of analytical. Oh, I realized I could pin this, make this a little bit bigger. How about this? Wow, that's a big difference. Sorry about that, team. All right, so analytical over there to the right. Very analytical in this regard. I imagine most people on this call, if not everybody, is pretty analytical. You got to be able to break down all the small parts. That was Henry Ford's big thing, right? Nothing is too difficult when broken down in small enough parts, and that's how he built the assembly line and the way he manufactured cars at such great numbers. So being analytical and being able to break down things is very important. And then the 3 C's. This is something that Shelby and I talk about a lot with the founders that we're working with. It's the character, confidence, and coachability. Every founder, especially those that are successful at raising funds, are gathering a large customer segmentation, or winning people over to your side, have a lot of character. Now, this is different than arrogance, right? Character is about who you are when no one's looking. And that's what, is pretty important inside of a founder. Confidence. This is also not arrogance, right? This is not being cocky about things, but this is being confident in your findings, confident in what you're, presenting to your customers, your investors, and understanding that they are investing or buying from you, and you have to show that confidence, right? But it's not arrogance. And then the last one, coachability. I strive to learn something new every day, and when I don't kind of find something new or Google something that challenges me, I get a little annoyed with myself. I mean, I'm that plugged into learning, but I love to coach as well, and I think that's what's helped me be a better mentor, is because I love to learn. That's what an entrepreneur needs to be too. Someone who is willing to learn as well as coach and mentor, because sometimes you have to coach and mentor your own team. Sometimes you have to coach and mentor your own customer segments. And sometimes you just have to coach and mentor your own self. But being able to learn, being able to follow, and being able to lead are all very important things when it comes to coachability. So character, confidence, coachability. All right, the one I didn't mention was empathetic tendencies. And being empathetic is, you'll see this a couple of times tonight, being empathetic is a skill, right? It's not something where in general terms, it has even been defined, at least in the last 20 years. It's a rather new term, but it's different than sympathy. And we'll talk about that. Empathetic and being empathetic is a great way, not just to kind of be a fellow human. So I'm not here to preach to you about how to be a good human. What I'm here to do is preach to you about why empathy is important in understanding a customer's perspective. Right? Understanding a customer's perspective, because what drives them, what motivates them, and what triggers they need to make a decision, is having a level of empathy to look past your own perspectives and look past your sympathies for someone and actually get into their shoes, into their mind, and understand what drives them, what motivates them, what are the pains, what are the gains. So that is really important. So you have to be, even if as an introvert, you have to be very outwardly looking, right? You have to look out and see the perspectives, have a lot of situational awareness about you. And that in itself will help with what the problem that entrepreneurs have, which is native bias. I have this great idea. I have a list of great ideas in my head. I think they're great ideas because I thought of them. About 95% of them, if I told y'all, you would all laugh, right? But that's my own native bias getting in my way. Now, I'll tell you a story about a guy who has about 36 patents. He's an absolute genius. He is a literal rocket scientist. And he is the one who invented the modern day water gun, right? The super soaker, a billionaire. He left his job after some time, believe it or not, doing both jobs at NASA to take on the super soaker idea and concept full time, right? And I bring that up because he had this world where he was really biased by everything that was going on. It's 2 months, and he looked outwardly to the world and found something that had nothing to relate it to anything that was in his realm of true kind of knowledge, and found something that was a disruptive kind of technology. I know everyone laughs because I'm talking about water guns, but has anybody not seen a super soaker in their life? I mean, yeah. Go look up the story about the guy who invented the foam, the styrofoam things for pools, right? The noodles, right? A very similar story. Okay. These are people that were not in that space of pool fun or water fun. And I know it's a little bit ironic or maybe coincidental that I picked 2 water things, but that's the situation, right? These are people that use their empathetic tendencies, use their extroversion or just looking outside the box, and got past their native biases to build products that a lot of people bought, right? So these are considerations for you. All right, so some skill sets. Critical problem solving. I doubt many people in this audience have a lot of problems with that. That's generally what you do for a living. Empathetic research, we just talked about that, but this is the research component. And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that a lot of y'all will find this to be a very comfortable space because it is very similar to the scientific method, right? And we'll talk about that in a few slides down, but research is a big component of this, right? Understanding, gathering data, data makes information, information makes insights, insights leads to a better product, right? So empathetic research is a big, huge component of this. User-centered ideation, going back to, again, understanding your customer and building something that's kind of human-centered, user-centered, right? You've heard probably human-centered design. I also like to use the user-centered, right? Because the user of your application, your process, your service is your customer, and that's who you should be focused on, right? They are humans, and so there's a play in that as well. Going back to the left there, risk mitigation, obviously, when things happen, there's a lot of controllables out there and uncontrollables out there. There's a lot of this, knowns, unknowns, unknowns, that are all these different categories that have to be mitigated when it comes to risk, right? The things you know, the things you don't know. Generally, when you're building a business, you need to make sure that something is financially possible, technologically possible, and socioeconomically and politically possible, right? And so I bring that up because sometimes risk mitigation might be changing laws, right? Or introducing laws, or sometimes risk mitigation might be other regulatory things that you have to try to mitigate and plan for. Conceptualization, obviously taking something that is on a napkin, moving it into something that can be prototyped and conceptualized, and then put in someone's hands, or at least put in front of someone as a service for them to start playing around with it, testing it out, moving things into place. And then that continues on and on. Strategic planning, obviously that's an easy one. Monetization, that's not so easy, right? That is taking what you have, and we'll go through this process during this cohort of getting to the point where you understand how to monetize your opportunity here. It won't be the, down to the brass tacks, dollar and cents understanding of how to monetize, how much money you need and everything else, but it's going to give you an overview of how things are monetized. If you put a product to market and you aren't making money, then it's a failed product. If you are making profit on every unit that you put out there, then you will be a successful business. It's very simple math in that regard. Startup funding, obviously raising money is important. There's lots of ways to go get money, especially in this space, through the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Health, Department of Education, Department of Energy, DoD. All these other groups actually give a ton of grant money for no equity into your business. So startup funding doesn't mean just going out for venture capitalists, and we'll talk about that in a few weeks down the road. And then a new one, entrepreneurship, sustainability, both inward and outward. Looking at your company to see how much of a zero footprint you can leave from whatever it is. There's a variety of climate things you can choose from for zero footprint, but also understanding that your business could be something that impacts sustainability outwardly, right? Something you're impacting from a socio-economic, political, geographic, demographic perspective will allow you to see if your company really pivots into a market that you might not have planned because you didn't realize the sustainability impact that it could make, right? So that's another area that we talk about a lot these days, and are pushing as many entrepreneurs as we can in that sustainability space that we can. All right, so are you creative? This is a question that I ask all the time. I used to teach a class in the beginning of the semester. I'd ask them, are you creative? I'd have one person raise their hand or two people raise their hand. And I said, okay, that's phooey. I am going to teach you all how to be creative. And I'm not a creative person by artistic value or anything like that. Although my NFTs are going to be spot on. Just wait for it. I'll announce it by the end of this thing. Oh wait, I don't want to think I'm trying to make money off of you. I'm just proud of my NFTs. But anyway, so going back to it, it's like creativity is something that actually can be taught, and that's what we taught in this class. So over the semester, we spent time breaking down the process, and we're going to talk about design thinking here next, breaking down the process on how to be creative, right? And like I said, it doesn't have to be directly aligned to being artistic or being able to, build something or fix something. It's something that you can actually create skills around, so you can be creative about anything you do. So are you creative? You might say not. I'm going to challenge that. If you want to take some design thinking classes and look those up, you'll learn that it's a process that you can learn and become creative. So let's break it down a little bit. Creativity is not bound by a single definition. We can express our own meaning of creativity as we describe what we experience when new ideas are formed, right? So even when you're brainstorming with someone else or moving into a space where it's a collective kind of collection of thoughts and everything towards a kind of a common plan or some sort of focused goal, being creative and giving feedback and changing concepts and working around problems and figuring out ways that the product will fit or won't fit or will work or won't work. Those are all creative solutions, right? So they're not bound by any single definition, and they come in all sorts of forms. Creativity denotes a person's capacity to produce new or original ideas, insights, inventions, artistic products, which accepted by experts as being scientific, aesthetic, social, or technical value. So this is kind of more the technical space here. This is kind of where this group might live more often, but being creative is also scientific, right? Being creative is also things that are non-artistic, but also artistic. It's also about data and machine learning and AI and creating, new ways for a machine to make decisions on our behalf. I know that's scary, but in some areas, that's really what it takes to bridge the gap on some life-saving techniques, right? Just being able to diagnose and do things faster. And that's where data and insights and everything else. So being creative. So a lot of these days, a lot of creation is coming in algorithms in a variety of ways to take data and turn it into new levels of insight. So creativity comes in all shapes and forms. I like to think of it in two ways. It's not just me. This is you can find this on the internet too. There's the small creativity changes that are in your everyday given kind of world, changing your wardrobe, changing your diet, things that make sense. I mean, there's small micro decisions, right, to be creative, but they are changes in you. When you just get sick of a general look that you have and you want to change your entire thing or wardrobe, or you just want to change a different look. I mean, that's being creative, but that's not change the world type creative. So we call those kind of the little C. Then you got the big C. These are the ones that are changing the world, like processing power and miniaturization changed the world many, many decades ago when the chip, and it's still affecting us with the chips getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but smarter and smarter and smarter that are in our computers. Batteries are great, great thing. I mean, we have these huge batteries, we have these small batteries, we have a bunch of small batteries making a huge battery, but the batteries have gotten more and more power and got longer and longer life. And now we're looking into a variety of different graphene and everything else, all these stuff to make batteries even better, right? So batteries have evolved. These are big time changes. Alternative fuel sources, alternative sustainability sources, social media, for crying out loud, big, huge C, right? Facebook changed the world. Love them, hate them, I don't care. But things like Facebook, Twitter, and everything else, they really changed the way we communicate with people. The pandemic, I mean, that wasn't a big creative change, but it did allow for or sponsor or push, create, catalyst, whatever you want to say, big, huge changes across the board. I mean, we meet more virtually than we do in person. That's by necessity, but that is going to carry on. From now, we see a lot more remote workers, right? So these things and these kind of force majeure kind of life things that happen, or just kind of these, big pushes in technology are fundamental shifts in the way we do things. So those are big C areas. But Mark Zuckerberg didn't change the world. Jeff Bezos didn't save the world. The large companies they built and of very talented and creative thinking people changed the world in good ways and bad with those two. All right, so let's talk about design thinking a little bit. We talked about empathy earlier. That's a very important thing. This is the process. I wish I could go in and actually dive really deep in design thinking. We actually do some exercises from prototyping. Be happy to talk to y'all individually about that if that's something you're interested in, push you in the direction of learning more about design thinking. But right now, we're going to kind of take it at a high level. We go back to the word empathy, right? Understanding people and understanding perspective. That's the best way to put it, right? Because if you're going to sell something to someone, you need to understand their perspective. There's a Fogg behavioral model, F-O-G-G, that's a creator of the behavioral model. He says that it postulates that every person makes a decision in the same way. All of us, we have motivations, we have the ability to either do or don't, and then we need a trigger, right? So I've got a car, it gets me to A, B. I don't have a lot of money, it's just fine. Wow, I've just got a new job, a new car came out. I really like that car, but I think I'll keep my money where it is and not do that. Next day, my car breaks down. All right, there's my trigger. Or maybe the car has a huge discount. There's my trigger, right? So I had motivation, I had the ability because I got a new job, but I didn't have the trigger until something changed in my life. Understanding how people make decisions is going to help you be empathetic to what their problems are. And understanding their problems is directly related to asking them what their problems are in a kind way, right? Not just what's your problem. So the idea here is to have the skill set of being empathetic and then deploy the tool of customer discovery to discover what those people need. And the needs come in two forms. And we'll talk about value proposition in a couple of weeks. The needs come in two forms. They either have pains or they have gains, right? So our product, solution, or service has to alleviate pains and provide gains. The only way for us to understand and catalog those pains and gains for our customer segmentation is to talk to them. The only way we're going to be able to get those insights after talking to them is being empathetic of where their position is and their perspective. All right. After you have that data, you start the definition phase. You kind of build out your hypothesis of what you're going to do, all your theories of what you're going to build. This is really where the problem starts to form into the next phase of what the solution could be right here. But the define stage is defining all the things that make up the problem. We'll talk about problem framing tonight. And then next week, we'll start talking about solution. That's when we get to the ideation process, that middle light bulb there of understanding, bringing the right people together, understanding all the information that's in front of you, understanding the properly framed problem so you can really put it in words and terms that you can try to solve. And then ideating, brainstorming, working with others, or just in your own little garage at home, coming up with solutions that could fit what you've discovered. Building a prototype, right? This is starting to sound like a scientific method, right? We observe something, we start defining our hypothesis, we create our tests and everything else. We deploy our tests into the field, right? And we test them, right? And then we observe and publish, or we return back to going through the process, right? If our theories weren't proven or disproven in the way that we need to move forward, we move backwards. And that's the same thing with this too. So ideation, prototype, test, ideation, prototype, test. But that doesn't mean you skip over empathize and define every time either. You do need to go back every time you make a prototype to that group that you're testing on and see if anything has changed, right? And then again, in the scientific model, if any catalyst has changed or any part of it variable has changed, you go back and reshape the test and everything else to account for those variables. So this is very similar to the scientific method. And the published part, the last part, is deploying your prototype into an MVP or a minimum viable product, right? So you've actually met the need for a customer with values that they are going to benefit from and a solution that works, and they have it in front of them and can actually utilize it. And now you can start generating revenue, right? That's design thinking. This is why I talk about how creativity is just a term and not a definition for someone, right? You're not creative or not creative, right? You are neither or both. But the idea here is you can be creative by going through a process to understand how to create. And I think that's the takeaway here from this slide. All right, so you might have seen this or heard this. The design thinking foundation is kind of the intersection of ideation, inspiration, and implementation, right? I mean, I might have an idea all day long, but it's not going to get anything out into the business world, right? It's not going to make any money. It's not going to make anybody happy or make, what is my idea and where does it come from? That's where the inspiration is, right? What inspires this idea? Why are we doing this? And then if that idea is inspired, well or otherwise, if we don't implement anything, then it's fruitless, right? It's a moot point at that point. So the intersection of those three is kind of the foundation for what we do in design thinking world. And just so you can see a visual representation of what design thinking looks like, this very much is what design thinking looks like. I have gone through this thousands of cycles in 30 years. It is a just mess of discovery at the beginning, right? You're observing, you're gathering information, you're interacting with people, you're doing tests, you're building out prototypes, you're testing them, rinse and repeat over and over again. And you'll notice as in your discovery phase moves into a more kind of focused phase of design, this is when you're getting closer to understanding what you need to build, right? And then it's not a direct flat line there always. Obviously, there's ups and downs, but delivery is kind of when this design phase for whatever you're building stops. But if you could just imagine, and probably I should add a slide that shows this little squirrely thing going to a less squirrely thing, going to a straight thing, just back to back to back to back, right? Because as you go into delivery, more than likely, in many cases, you are actually changing your customer as you're giving them products or services. They are expecting more. their expectations grow in short and long term to say either this is still delivering the pains and the gains, or alleviating the pains and giving me gains, or it no longer is, or a competitor is, right? And maybe it's a competitor that's just coming in at a different price point, or maybe it's a competitor that's doing the business better than you, right? And so if you keep on this flat line, you can just imagine that flat line is going to be the law of diminishing returns, right? It's going to keep going down and down and down and down until your business is really not having any good days because customer satisfaction is through the floor, right? Because you did not continuously evolve, discover what's going on with your customers, keep up with their needs and understanding their value propositions, and just kind of moving forward, inventing and reinventing and keeping moving the product down the product roadmap to more and more customers. All right, one more slide about human-centered design. Again, the intersection of innovation is in the desirability, feasibility, and viability. I talked about this earlier, right? If you can't build a product because it costs too dang much, then you're not going to get to market, right? If you don't have a product that is viable because the technology is not there to build it, which we see things all the time. We see theories postulating these days about warp drive and time travel and all these different things. And some of this stuff looks pretty legit science-wise, cannot be produced in the real world, right? So the viability is not there, even though conceptually it's there, right? And then desirability, if no one wants to buy it, then no one's gonna buy it, right? Because so feasibility, viability, and desirability. And just so you know, there's kind of an adage that we talk about, like if you're building a product for everyone, you're building a product for no one. If everyone has superpowers, then there are no super people, right? So the idea there is to understand what your market is, the desires of that market, figure out if the feasibility is there, and figure out the viability is there of actually delivering. That's the intersection is where true innovation occurs. And I want to go back to one thing. There's a timeline for this too, right? It can be there, two of the bubbles, but not the third bubble. But the third bubble, in this case, maybe viability when we're talking about warp speed and Star Trek and Vulcans coming to Earth. The viability can all of a sudden occur later down the road when time is right. And we see that a lot these days, right? Technology that's been sitting on the shelf conceptually for a long period of time that now finally the technology has come to pass, right? And some technologies just weren't taken advantage of in the right time. Tesla is not the first electronic car. Electronic cars have been around since the late 70s and early 80s, right? But Tesla waited for the right time to have the best battery consumption and everything they needed to hit the market, right? So they hit the market at the right time because I think also desirability was there now and not in the early 80s, right? That desirability is a big component. Okay. Empathy versus sympathy. So we've talked about empathy quite a bit. I want to put it in terms of what the difference is between empathy and sympathy. So empathy, term we use for the ability to understand other people's feelings. It's a key word there, understand, right? Living in someone else's shoes. Simply refers to the ability to take a part in someone else's feelings, mostly by feeling sorrowful about their misfortune, right? So, I mean, a lot of times I take it in two different ways. Like if I'm being empathetic to a person, I'm trying to really understand what's going on, and hopefully if they want me to, I mean, but I try to understand what's going on and be very empathetic, try to live what they're going through by putting myself in their shoes, right? Sympathy is simply saying, you know what, that sucks, right? Someone's venting about your day and you just say, you know what, I've been there, that sucks. And that's sympathy, right? But notice the transaction there that I was talking about, the differences. With sympathy, it's quick. I do mean that sucks. I do mean for you to feel like I feel for you, but I'm not investing a lot into what's causing your problem, right? And so empathy is something different. And like I said, it's not always received, right? You can't be empathetic with someone who doesn't want you to be empathetic with them. But that generally what an empath kind of sees before walking into that scenario. But an empathetic person is someone who's going to be able to say to a customer that they're finding out information, very good open-ended questions that allow them or elicit, I should say, the inner, kind of bringing out the inner therapist, elicit the responses that you are hoping for, which are honest responses about what is causing those pains, and then also what kind of gains they're hoping to get after the alleviation of those pains. So really getting deep into what the understanding is of motivations for another person, perspectives. Okay, so we're going to pivot now and stop talking about empathy, sympathy, and psychological terms and scientific method and all these other things, although we could talk about those things for days too. This is the first iteration or the first implementation for y'all of the Ideas Discovery Canvas. This is the tool that we built when we're at CBU to help us help our students and our founders that we have in our incubator and the other business people that we work with on a daily basis, Shelby and I, to help them understand how to build a single page business plan. You know, we've talked about business plans, or we haven't, but let me tell you real quickly about business plans. I've talked about them so often. I sometimes think I've talked about everybody with them. That business plans, you know, that term business plan was a 30, 40 page document that was created by banks several decades ago, right? They just wanted something that they could put their hands on that had some basic understanding of what the summary of the business was, what the possible outcomes could be, what the financials were, and the valuation of that company, who's who's on the board, what CEOs are there, blah, blah, blah. You know, they really just wanted to get a document in place so they can make a financial assessment on whether they're going to fund somebody or not. That's generally where the business plan started. Of course, it started with entrepreneurs and kind of creating the business plan, but that business plan in itself was definitely created specifically to get somebody to give you something. And that something generally was money, funding, investment, right? It just smacks of it when you read a business plan. That's generally what it's focused on. That's not what we like here. So we've had a few iterations in our industry around entrepreneurship, the business optimization canvas, the lean canvas, which many of y'all may have heard. And where we felt like there was an opportunity for us is to create one that made sense to what we taught in our curriculum. We structured it up a little different and made it kind of look in a way that could be broken up into segments that are easy to build. And then when you put it all together, you have a single page that shows your entire business plan. And if you're looking at it right now, you have all these different pieces that you can look. If they all dovetail together, then you should have a pretty locked in visual of what your business plan should be. And a lot of what you'll do in this process is cutting things out. It's subtraction, right? It's improvement through subtraction, taking the things out that don't match. And when we start with the problem framing process tonight, that's the start of that. That's the start of weeding out the things that we believe could be part of the problem to get to the things that actually are the problem. All right, so let's break this down. We first have that first section, right? Top left-hand corner, 3 blocks. This is product market fit. This is where we really get centered on, do we have a right product for the right customer? And is that solution exactly what needs to be for make that customer buy something from us? We break down the problem or idea in pretty simple terms, the who's, the what's, when's, where's, and how's, right? And so, and I think I left why out there for some reason. I'll go and check that and figure that out. But those things are why we do this, is to figure out all the different pieces that need to be in place to understand and frame out the problem, and only the problem. And I'll give you an example of a problem here in a minute. I have a slide down the right that shows it. So we'll talk about that as we're talking about problem framing. Customers and customer segmentation, we're going to talk about that tonight as well. And that's an area of great importance, right? That's how you understand what type of customers you have and whether they're consumers or customers, influencers or buyers. You know, there's a lot of products out there that have either a niche customer segmentation or a multi-layered customer segmentation, a B2B and a B2C component. One of my last businesses, I had to sell both to the business and to the consumer of that business. And it was a quite difficult sales process, but when it paid off really, really well. And then moving into solution, illustrating exactly what the problem is going to solve and how, right? That's the big how here. And that's what we'll go through mostly starting tonight. In the unique value proposition, this is specifically, I've mentioned this several times tonight. I've mentioned the 2 things that are the most important things. We actually have a Canvas tool for value proposition 2 that we'll introduce in a couple of weeks. The unique value proposition is one of the most critical transfer points into this next space, which is kind of looking at the market landscape and how I need to deliver the product to market, go to market, right? One is I need to make sure that I have unique value proposition, pains and gains. I've already said it several times. The other thing is unfair advantage. How am I better than my competitors? And how do I protect myself from my competitors? And we'll talk about that during this cohort as well when we talk about regulatory in a couple of weeks. This is not just about intellectual property protection and my unfair advantage is because I own a patent, right? It is also about how I execute. If I execute everyone in my industry, then I'm going to gain more customer shares, more market share, and I'm going to be more successful. So if my team is firing on all cylinders, great culture, great everything, everybody's moving forward in the right direction, our product is perfectly aligned, and we're beating our competitors hand over fist, I could even charge more than my competitors, because all that's going to do is actually show them to be cheap versions of mine when I will have a group of dedicated individuals who are focused on mine and subscribing to what I share on a daily basis, right? Whether that's a product or anything in there. So my thing is like put all the copyrights and the trademarks and the patents and all the other IP protection areas in place. Those are very, very important, but make sure you have everything you need to out execute your competitors. That's going to be the end of the day, the most important thing. Channels and partner. This is both inbound and outbound. So this is both marketing, but you also have to understand, we had to have a place for you to understand how to source and procure and do a variety of different things to actually make this happen. So what partners you need, business development in this area. Known obstacles, we talked about that earlier too. Knowns, unknowns, knowns, knowns, unknowns, unknowns, unknowns. Try to say that 5 times. I bet you can't do it. I think I challenged Rohan last year to do that too, and he still hasn't done it. But you know, these are the things that you have to try to mitigate. This is that area to try to do that. It's a small block. You're not going to be able to fit everything in more than likely, but at least you can put the high level things that have to be done first. And for y'all, regulatory is a big one here, right? So some of these products, not all of them, some of the products you know and love back at your office and work, some of the other things you have involvement in, and some of the things you'll invent in the future, especially in the medical device space, you know, going through FDA's 510K process, depending on what class you are, it can be a very laborious and long timeline kind of thing, right? But that needs to be in there. It's not necessarily an obstacle, but things can present themselves through that process that become an obstacle. So a risk mitigation plan on understanding the regulatory impacts is very, very important. All right, bottom section before we get to the last little bonus square is all about the finances and continuous improvement. So breaking down the cost and profit variables, and then also understanding how you're going to make money through what stream. So these two blocks go together. We need to understand what the cost of goods sold are, what the calculations for lifetime value, profit margin, so on and so forth. All these acquisition costs go into the bottom line of what we actually have to pay to deliver a product. And then looking into the revenue streams, understanding what we need to make and how we need to make it to make a profit, right? You have to understand how you're going to pay. If this is something that's in a hospital, that it might be a 3-party kind of payer program, right? Where you have to have reimbursements through the insurance program. So then you have to have codes along with that. There has to be a precedent for that code. If not, you have to introduce a new code, right? And that can take a lot of time. So one thing, going back to obstacles, you need to make sure it's there. And the revenue streams, you also need to understand what it takes to make that money through that channel, right? And so all these kind of match up. And if you're not making a profit, then your business is slowly dying. If you're not making any profit and losing a lot of money, then your business is quickly dying, right? And so making profit obviously is extremely important. And not all the times will you make all the profit in products. You may lose money in products, but that is a kind of a loss leader approach of getting people over at a loss for you, just to acquire them as customers so you can upsell them for other things, right? So not every product has to be profitable, but the product suite and the business has to be profitable. And then key metrics. This is a really important one too. You know, these are key decision areas that you need to kind of understand. You're not going to put all the KPIs and all these different things in this box, but you will kind of put in the pieces that you are going to measure, right? What are you going to measure? Customer satisfaction, quality of service, quality of product, so on and so forth, right? And so these are the areas that you're going to pay attention to and build a separate metrics plan for. And then again, as we like to do, adding something, a stretch goal, how can your product, service, or company contribute to the community and global sustainability, whether that is directly related to what you're doing to offset what you're taking from, what things you're taking from the earth to kind of manufacture or doing everything you want with your product and deliver it to market. But also that plus what your product can actually do to change the world in that regard. You know, there's lots of great technologies on pulling bad things out of the air and reusing those and putting in different spaces. And it's just a really cool area to be into. So I ask everyone to kind of think sustainability as something as a stretch goal. Okay. Markets and customers. Let's jump right in. But actually, before I do, I've talked about a lot. So let me just open it up to anybody who might have any questions. Maybe talking a lot helps with the questions. That's good. Just so you know, every one of these things is recorded. So all the stupid things I say can be heard anytime you want by going to our YouTube channel. And the stupid things are the small little jokes and sometimes the tangents I'll get caught on and generally they're fun. Shelby's always laughing at me about those. These are all going to be on our YouTube channel, right? So you're going to be able to come back, fast forward, get to any section that you want. So if there's anything that you didn't ask tonight, you can ask us in office hours, you can send us emails, chat with us, DM us, whatever you want. But you can also go look back at the video and try to find the answer yourself if you want to do it that way as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm sorry. It's mostly about like how to access these, like what is the YouTube channel called, and like what is the best contact information for everybody here?
That's a great question. And I hope to have had all that kind of before today, but it just didn't happen, right? So tomorrow, between Shelby and I, we will gather all the pieces that you need. We have a Google Drive. We have team folders. You'll have access to specific folders in our Google Drive that have the pitch deck in it, that has the canvases in it. We'll also send an email with our YouTube channel for the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation for CBU. And that's where all these videos are stored. Also, all our decks that we're using are in that Google Drive. And then, like I said, there's going to be a team folder for each one of y'all to submit your work on a weekly basis and just collect your thoughts and your assets. So we'll follow up. It's a great question. Sorry, my answer wasn't here. Here it is. But it's my answer is more, it's coming soon.
No, that's totally fine. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure, Madison. Okay, let's carry it forward. Again, if you have questions, raise your hand. Shelby will ding me if I can't see you and I keep moving on if I'm in a tangent or something else, but just, stop me if you have a question. I get tired of hearing my own voice sometimes, so. Okay, so market segmentation, this conversation can go a lot of different ways. So my goal is to not talk about it a lot because in depth, this conversation could take hours, right? Understanding the variety of segmentations of market types out there, each one of them to kind of put them in simple terms. But if you were to drive down these things, it can be, it's actually a great conversation to have and a lot of good research to do. I just don't want to do it tonight, right? We'll talk about it more as we move forward through solution and customer discovery. But basically, thinking about demographics, thinking about psychographics, the social side of things, the behavioral side of things, and the geographic side of things, you can see how breaking these customers up in these kind of smaller buckets will allow you to kind of choose how you're going to deliver a solution for them. This also lets you get a better understanding of who the personas are, the persona type of a customer inside these areas, and how these areas kind of affect you, right? So my goal here is to kind of let you know that don't look at a customer just simply as another human, right? Look at a customer in a way that you can kind of slice and dice who they are. I know that sounds weird, but you know what I mean, right? What are their demographic impacts and what are their sociographic impacts? What are their behavioral impacts and what are their geographic impacts, right? I mean, you can't sell a product to every country in the world. You can try. It's rather difficult. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. There are products definitely that are all around the world, but they're fewer and far between than you might think. And things that we think about are all around the world, they're actually not, right? Out of the 200 countries in this world with 6 levels of classification, not everyone has the ability to have the things we do, right? We're talking about 5G. There's other countries that are now using only 3G, right? And they just got there. So the idea there is like, you have to understand the demographics. You have to understand the components that break up a market. And that's an important part here. You can look this up online too. Another thing I don't want to go heavy into, but just to give an understanding for a couple of reasons, is the addressable market, right? So going back to what I just said, building a product for everyone in the world, highly unlikely, very difficult to do. Only products that come out of absolute necessity, like vaccines, but we didn't have one vaccine, right? We've had several, so it wasn't just even one group taking over that total addressable market. So even the one vaccine didn't go everywhere in the world. Okay, so although that might be the global market, not one company captured that global market is what I'm trying to say there. So that total addressable market, think of it along the same lines. In fact, this is great. I can use this as an example even further into this. So this addressable market, that's the global market in this regard, because this was a global pandemic. So we'll take this example. All right, so like I said, you're not going to be able to go anywhere in the world. So what's a serviceable available market. So that's the one where I think I can go. Now let's take Pfizer, or let's take one of the other groups, right, where that did have an international presence, but wasn't allowed their version in every space, right? There was the UK version that came out. I'm sure people can correct me on a variety of these things, but I'm keeping a pretty high level here. So the idea is like not every one of even a single product base could be utilized everywhere in the world, because some of those other countries had their own vaccines, and some of those manufacturers were trying to make sure that they provided the vaccines for those world too. Obviously, it all came down to several few that were working the best because of the data, but in the early stages, there was a big, large available market and a lot of people going after it, right? So what is the obtainable market, right? That's the key word: the addressable, the available, and the obtainable. The idea there is a segmentation, a smaller group of the available market that you're actually going to be able to penetrate. You're actually going to be able to get market share for. And that's going to be much smaller than you may think it is early on. And the one part I want to risk, kind of give you, share you an area of risk there, is like I see when we do pitch decks, people putting in there because they want the investors to think this is a $120 billion industry, right? This is a $3 trillion business, and we're going to go get 75% of the market share. If you want an investor to quit listening to you at a very point, this is it, right? Because now they know you don't really understand what reality is, right? But even going back down to it, so understanding that you can set a large stage for something, especially if the product really is aligned for that. But getting down to the obtainable market has to be very realistic, in some ways very conservative, at least in the initiation stage, because who is going to say that their MVP is something that can go take up 3/4 of the world, right? That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It'd be great if it could, but I don't believe it's going to happen. So the idea there is like, what can we actually obtain in this market? Or so the TAM, SAM, and SOM are pretty important things. You can go online, look up those terms individually and together, and get more information about those. And there's some changes in terminology for some of them, but this is pretty much the context for everything. Back, wrong way. Okay, customer versus consumer. I mean, this is a pretty big distinction that I don't think a lot of people really think about at face value, but there can be two types when you're talking about these things. There's the one who is actually doing the buying, and there's the one that might be using the service that was bought. I mean, I'll give you a basic example of, a parent buying something for the kid. Right. So the kid is the consumer and actually making the decision whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. But the customer is the one who bought it. The consumer is the one who influenced the purchase. Right. And so some cases, when you're looking at that beachhead we talked about, mentioned earlier, you have to really also sub-segment these groups, and they're understanding who is the influencer, who is the one that is going to be the saboteur in the decision process, internally or externally, who the purchaser actually is, and who the ultimate decision makers. And those can be 4 different people, right? And so understanding the differences between what a customer and a consumer is pretty important when you start thinking about how to motivate a variety of individuals all collectively to buy your one product. Because each one of those, guess what, probably need a different value proposition narrative sold to them. For a hospital, it might be cutting costs. That's who you want to talk to sourcing and procurement and the administration about. But to the physician or nurses or the caregivers, it's about saving lives. Now, I don't want to make it sound like I think administrators and hospitals don't care about saving lives, but I think we can all understand that their motivation is also saving $1 or making $1, right? That's their motivation. So is it a different value proposition? Yeah, it's a different narrative, right? They have different value propositions. They won't just take the influence if it doesn't mean something to the hospital, both to either cut cost or make money. Otherwise, they wouldn't do that because they're a business after all, right? Okay, so we've pivoted a few times. We started talking about creativity, design thinking. I didn't cover those like in huge depth, like I would over multiple classes. I'm happy to talk about those things more in the office hours or just offline or in email or any other way of communicating. But the most important part of this whole cohort is kind of getting into the problem, solution, customer phases, so we can get the value proposition and then go to market strategies, regulatory, and a few other things that you're going to really need to get to in the next 5 weeks in order to start building out that deck, right? So this first part of this presentation, go back, look at the deck, go back and look at the video, listen to it again if you can stand my voice twice talking about the same thing, and just kind of re-digest everything we just talked about. So this is the area that I really want to focus on next, because this is the kind of the start. Going back to the idea discovery canvas, this is that first box. Okay, so what is problem framing? And the what there is not about what it is. It's more about, that's the first part of it. So what we're trying to do is determine the type of problem you're trying to solve. Is it an existing problem or issue? Do they already have it in place, or is it not going to be a problem yet, right? And so you have to understand what the level of problem they're suffering from. Also, when you're talking about problem framing, you're talking about a brand new idea or improvement to an existing product. So something might be in place and working just fine. Ain't broke, don't fix it, right? There's no problem with it. But with the way technology and everything moves forward, there are better ways are discovered of doing things, more economical, more efficient, more effective. And so when these things come to be, then they can change and disrupt an existing product base, right? And so that's something where an idea might not be solving a problem because a problem wasn't really there, but understanding what the value gain is by doing something differently or new, novel, will really kind of change the landscape there. Identifying a market. Is an existing new market similar to the other things? What similar products or services exist in the market? What types of potential customers may benefit from your concept, right? So these are all kind of starting to gather in all the details of what other people are doing, what other things are out there. And this is all kind of building up to understanding what the exact problem is you're solving. This goes back to native bias again, too. If you are the type of person that thinks of something but doesn't want to challenge that, okay, that's okay. But you're not going to get as far as maybe you could, or probably, or most likely, or almost definitely you could if you kind of did it the other way. So, when you're going through these things and understanding this new landscape, you have to understand that your bias, your native bias, the things that you kind of hold near and dear might be the things limiting you. You'll be the thing that's in your own way. Right. And so when you start breaking down the bias and you start looking at it, which means looking to see if there was other products. I remember early on in my entrepreneurship career, I was scared to kind of look out there and see what was out there, right? Because I didn't want to know if my idea had already been done by someone and done a heck of a lot better. And that happened, right? Several times. Oh, someone already thought about that. I'm not uniquely smart, right? I just like to think about things. So looking out into the real world and understanding what is out there already to help me identify what the problem is very, very important. Is someone already serving the problem? If they are serving, trying to resolve the problem, are they doing it well, right? Do they know what I know? And those are all things that kind of affect when you're framing out the problem. And then getting down to really defining the problem. What is the difference in a personal or native bias and thinking objectively about your concept? What are the underlying causes for the problem, separate fact, form, fiction, stuff like this? How far can you break down the problem to get to the core of what is trying to be solved or brought to market, right? So breaking the problem down in distinct terms will allow you to kind of frame out what a problem's statement is. Asking yourself why. So I talk about this all the time, like both when I'm talking to myself and when I'm talking to customers. The why question, the 2-year-old asking why the sky blue, is an extremely effective way of finding out information. Even if it's just belligerently kind of repeating the question, why is the sky blue? Why is the sky blue? Eventually you're going to get an answer. It might not be an answer you like, but you're going to get an answer, right? So ask yourself, why do I or others have this problem? And the 5 whys. The 5 whys is not a finite number. Actually, that's just what we call it. But what to kind of employ the 5 whys when you're talking to a customer, it's kind of going back to that inner therapy thing. Instead of saying, how does that make you feel? You just keep saying why. You might say in different terms or words or styles, but effectively you're asking why. Each level of information you're getting from them, you're asking them why. Why did you choose that? Why did that help you? Why were you dissatisfied for that? Just continue asking the why question in kind of an open-ended format allows you to get open-ended kind of discussion and dialogue back, information back, right? If you were to ask very, very specific questions, not simple ones, you're going to get very, very specific answers. And if you want very, very specific answers, odds are you're kind of conditioning your customer there. You're kind of conditioning your subject. And that's when you start getting biased information because you've directed them towards a way. So asking simple time words, and I simplify it to one word, why, is a great way of eliciting more information from other individuals. Gathering consumer and market feedback. So doing the internet searches, asking to Quora, asking different things, Reddit, whatever you want to consume information, asking the public, doing blogs and social posts and feedback, presenting questions out there. These are just a few ways to kind of gather consumer information. You can probably think of a dozen more, right? But it's just, maybe if it's just asking your friends at a barbecue, or some sort of event, what they think about an idea. That's starting with customer discovery. And that's really where we push people to kind of start with their friends and family and then go from there, because friends and family are naturally biased too. My dad has said every idea I've ever had was fantastic. And now after 30 years, I realized he was lying about half of them, but that is what it is. All right. So then base your findings, break down the problem into symptoms and causes or smaller logical chunks. This is going back to the Henry Ford statement I made earlier. Breaking things down that are difficult into smaller chunks makes it simple to get to a resolution or get to a solution. So breaking things down, you do this analytically. Y'all do this probably in your everyday lives of getting down to those basic nuts and bolts of something so you can understand its entire, reason for being. And that's a pretty important part. And especially when you're creating things, not getting overly complex in what you're creating to not, overshadow the value that you're trying to deliver. So how? Identify and try to quantify the problem's impact if not solved. So how is this going to affect the person if we don't supply a solution? Identify the possible benefits of solving the problem. So how is this person going to benefit from our customer service is going to benefit from my service or solution? Before committing to a problem to address with a possible solution, keep digging deeper and deeper, adjust your goals for solving the problem in question. This is going back to what we talked about earlier about just rinse and repeat, right? Keep going back with the information until you feel like there's no more nuggets of gold to collect. And when you're doing customer discovery, I try to aim for 100 people to talk to in the first kind of segment of customer discovery gathering. Because I figure if I can get to 20, 30% kind of saying the same or similar things, I got an idea. If I only hear like 5%, I'm going to drop it probably in a heartbeat. But if I get 30% of people kind of giving me the same vibes about what I'm looking for and the information and starting to validate what I'm thinking and everything else, that's when I start digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's also when I start asking more and more people. But as I'm creating more understanding for myself of what the problem is that I need to solve and the solution I need to deliver, then I go back to some of those people that I thought were more receptive to the conversation, right? I start to identify those people that are the earliest champions of my ideas. I go, hey, look, I've made some changes. Can you give me some more feedback? Right. And so, yes, they have a little bit of bias because they came to this early and they're seeing what was there, but they also had the ability to now see what's improved and give you more information about how it can be improved even more. Right. And so the idea there is like rinse and repeat, keeping going back, talking to these individuals, digging deeper and deeper and deeper, and utilizing those people and the personnel that you talk to give you more information. All right. And this last one here, unpacking the whys that we asked earlier, associated with each segment of your problem, can reveal gaps in your understanding, identify your native biases and assumptions, and the impact and prevalence of your problem or lack thereof. So unpacking all the things you heard piece by piece will help you validate your problem. I went the wrong way again. Then the when and where. So when does this problem occur? That's very important. It might be in a certain time. It might be on the third shift in a hospital. It might be some all day for the hours between 9 and 11 for a general population in the state of Tennessee. It has to have some sort of context about when this problem occurs, if it is, or when the opportunity for the solution occurs as well, if it's something new. And where is the problem connected to a particular place or set of circumstances? I just laid some of those out for you, right? That was both a timeline kind of situation and a place situation. It's happening at this department, at this shift, between this hours. That's where the problem is happening, right? And that's the area of opportunity for a solution. All right, so here's an example of the problem framing. Townsville General Hospital, where operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As such, patients' needs must be addressed all around the clock. For the overnight shift, when there are currently no cardiology technologists scheduled, what is the problem? What's missing, which can create issues for emergency staff who, some patients wait for 4 hours or more for a medical laboratory assistant to administer an ECG, a task better suited for a cardiology technologist to perform and interpret. The results in poorer patient care and worse health conditions. Why? The hospital should always have a cardiology technologist available, even if they are only on call for the overnight shift. And that's like the basic little nugget of the solution right there. The how. How is the problem going to be fixed, right? So we broke down the where, when, what, who, and why. And then we deliver a small little how we're going to fix that, right? What is the problem? And it's not the solution necessarily. It's just kind of the doorway for the solution. We know that the hospital should always have a cardiology technologist available, even if they are only on call for the overnight shift, because that's when the biggest problem occurs, right? Might not be the most frequent problem, but it could be the biggest problem, right? And so this is kind of a doorway into the solution out there. So that's why we set this problem up. We set it up this way so we can kind of enter into that next space of understanding what the true customers are and what the true solution is. Okay, so we breezed through most of this course just tonight in the first hour, and that's great. But I also want to have some time for question and answers, but you do have homework. Okay. So, and you can look these things up online. So when I say online, I love to just point y'all to Google, and I've given you plenty of keywords. So if you want to look up problem framing statements or problem statements, you can do that. I recommend just going back into the deck and, and kind of breaking it down and understanding what the pieces are that we talked about, right? The who, what's, when's, why's, where's, and then the how. Understanding the stuff that we talked about before we got into the problem statement is also very important, right? That's the basis and the basics of understanding how you need to get to where you are to be able to properly frame a problem statement. If we can't create a problem statement, then we're going to have difficulties understanding the solution, right? Where it actually applies. If we can't get the problem statement, then we're not going to be able to understand truly what customers we're going to target with marketing campaigns or sales campaigns, or just generally moving out into the market and trying to capture the market. If we don't have a properly defined and stated problem, we can't get to those two things, and we're certainly not going to get to value propositions. We're certainly not going to get to anything else even remotely close to cost and revenue, because we just don't have the problem properly framed, right? And so that's why this first part of the exercise is pretty important. So what you need to do between now and next week, next Thursday, and we'll give you till the end of day Wednesday to get this into your Google Drive that we'll talk to you about tomorrow. We'll send out more information about. You need to get with your team. I would suggest y'all probably go through a bit of a process of just digesting the IP that you've learned, right? The ones that you've chosen to work on. Spend some time with your IP holders to get a better understanding. And here's how I want you to approach it if you choose. Think of your IP holder as a customer, right? Take it the approach that they're the ones who best understands what the problem is, why they got to where it is, and what the solution is that they're proposing, right? Break it down in a way so you're asking questions so you get a better understanding of what the motivation was, a better understanding of what the problem area was, right, wrong, or indifferent, because the problem might change, right? But understanding where the motivation was and the problems originally occurred for the solution that was created, right? Understanding all of the things that provide value, right? But digging deeper into those things. So you do an interview process back and forth between the IP holder and yourself. And I'm sure all of them are very willing to help you out in any way they can to kind of get a better understanding of what the IP is, so you can kind of create this thing. So I believe a problem statement created by your team in coordination and collaboration with your IP holder, with the information that we showed you on how to structure that thing, shouldn't be that difficult. Probably the whole thing, hour and a half of conversation with your IP holder, and you could have your problem statement. We had that question much earlier on about how many hours a week you have to spend on it. Other than these classes, I'm telling you about another hour for this exercise. If it takes 2 hours, that's okay too. If you can do it in 30 minutes, good for you. If you need to talk to us about it and get more information, we are happy to help. That's what our jobs are. We are here to help you get to that point. So if you have an idea of a problem statement, you think it might need work, you want some more subjective feedback or objective feedback rather, send it to us, or both, send it to us. We will give you constructive feedback regardless of where it's got motivated from, but it'll be very constructive feedback on how you can make your problem statement better, or just at least validate that it's where it needs to be, right? And so utilize us. We're here. Email is a great way of getting to us, and we'll set up other time as the cohort progresses to spend more time with each individual thing, problem area if we need to. But right now, it's just, we're here for email. Just send them to us and we'll give you our feedback. Work with your IP holders, work with the team, start building relationships between y'all, start understanding who's going to do what and how on all that stuff, and build us a good problem statement for us to discuss next week. Okay. Thank you. That was it for the content for tonight. We're going to spend more time next week So last week was kind of the one that we always plan to keep it to 2 hours, but we always just keep enjoying and listening to all this really cool technology and we go over. This week, generally we finish a little bit early because next week we're going to discuss the homework at the beginning and go through some more levels of understanding in this regard. So next week we'll probably push into the 1.5 hour range that we usually try to aim for. Tonight, we're going to get you out of here 15 minutes early, but I'm also happy to answer questions for as long as we need to if you have them.
Yeah, I got 2 quick questions. My first question is, so just clarifying, will we be scheduling these meetings with our team offline on our own time, or is there already a predetermined time?
Yeah, no, there's no predetermined time. So, just however y'all's calendars align.
Okay. And then another quick question, I guess, when thinking about from the presentation, thinking about the customer and the consumer with a lot of these medical technologies and medicines that we're working on, are we more picturing the patient for this technology, or is it the healthcare provider or doctor that we are kind of targeting? I guess it depends, but just in general, yeah.
I think it does depend, but I think in most cases, the answer is a general yes. And let me give you a quick example. Working with a company here in town, building a novel EEG solution that is completely portable, right? So it's a cap that goes on the head. It's got 32 leads on it. It's about to have 64 leads on it. Think sleep studies, epilepsy, stuff like that, right? So an epilepsy patient has to come in to an EMU and stay there for days waiting for an epileptic episode to occur so they can collect data, right? If they were able to do it at home with this cap that they put on, so much easier. So I bring all that up, just kind of give you the context. But what we discovered when we're working with this company is the patient was as important as the neurologist that wanted that device to collect the data, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, the neurologist is trying to capture the data, right? Because they want to do diagnosis and treatment plans. So they want the data, right? And they're going to utilize the tool to capture the data, but compliance was an issue, right? We need the customer to understand they're important in the role too, in order to be able to don the cap properly, to make sure that's giving feedback. So they're building a tablet interface that they will have to go along with the cap that gives them positive signs for things going well, some high level data points and stuff for just to impress them that they're collecting data on that stuff and give them some personal insight. So saying all that now, understanding that, one's a consumer and one's a customer, but then again, whose insurance is paying for it, right? So the patient's insurance is paying for it. So that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about slicing and dicing these customer segments to understand who the influencers are, who the decision makers are, who the consumers are, who the customer is, so on and so forth, who the saboteur is, right? The epilepsy monitoring units have equipment already in it that's non-ambulatory, and they charge $25,000 a session, right? And plus $6,000 to $8,000 a night for the patient to be in the EMU. So they're motivated to not let this cap come from this other company, right? But so anybody in that space, those could be the saboteurs that are already in the hospitals with a device and everything else. So thinking about all the different decision makers and customers and the customer types, yeah, you kind of have to build a narrative that fits them all, or a variety of narratives that fit that distinguishable one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So kind of going off of that, who are you initially targeting other than, who are you initially selling this cap to, right?
Yeah.
You have to target both of these people, but who are you, I guess, giving the pitch to, initially?
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm actually an advisor to this company. So this is great. I love talking about this company, right? So let's continue using it as an example. And just so you know, this company also went through the National Science Foundation boot camp, the National Science Foundation phase 1. They received $250,000 for phase 1. They're in line to receive $500,000 additional for phase 2 and phase 2B. And that money is matching too. So they're looking to raise $750,000 to $1 million just in non-equity exchanged funds from the government. Side note, right? We'll talk about that in more depth later. But going back to it, we really had to break down that beachhead into a lot of different things, also to find the first person to talk to. What we discovered is the neurologist was the first person to talk to. And I won't even try to say the epileptic version of neurologist. If anybody can else say it, please do it's terribly difficult to say. But the epileptic focused neurologists, they were the first person to kind of say, look, I want access to that data. And then also we're selling an algorithm that takes that data with machine learning and does some other things to it to give predictive analysis, right? So the play is not just about collecting data. The play is not about having the patient be compliant or feeling like they're part of the compliance quotient to collect the data. The neurologist wants the data so they can do the monitoring and get the insight information based on the data, right? So they can see more patients. So they're not spending days and days collecting data. They can build a data repository because these neurologists might see 3,000 or 4,000 patients in their region. A set of neurologists might, right? And so over the course of a year. So it's a lot of different things. So we ultimately said, okay, let's go to the neurologist first. Now, are they the one buying this product? Absolutely not. They're not going to spend a dime on our product, right? So they're not the initial customer that we're going after to try to sell them to buy, right? What we're trying to do is to influence them to be an influencer, but that's our first customer that we have to sell to. If you think about the kind of the pathway, the linear pathway that gets to the exponential pathway, right? We still have to find each person that makes sense to our process. So eventually we've softened the beachhead, right? And we're delivering our product to market. So that was really, so we tested that theory out, Madison. We actually went to George Washington University and talked to the sleep studies director there. So you have the neurologists on one side that were very focused on epilepsy and monitoring of epilepsy. And then you have sleep apnea doctors on this other side. The number one problem with sleep apnea is collecting data, right? 70% of at-home sleep apnea tests fail. I had to do it twice and I felt like an idiot both times. Right? The damn green light came on. I know it did, but it collected no data because I didn't have the lead pushed in all the way. Right. And so what he was saying is like, wait a minute. So this is, and so the big thing with what he was saying is like, if I can save time and money that the patient has to pay for between a $400 device test lease, they just send it home and they bring it back the next day, or a 3,000 inpatient sleep study, which I will also attest is one of the most uncomfortable things you could possibly go through because you have leads down your entire body and you can't move, right? So, but they're still trying to collect mostly brain scan data, stroke data, heart rate, different things like that. So with a pulse oximeter and a few other things added to the cap, you can collect all that data at home, right? And with the interface saying everything's good, we give a lot of information. So the George Washington Sleep Studies director loved the idea, all right? And so that's where we're going. But let me add just one more thing to it. This is far, this is down the line a lot far, is where we want to bring that product is to the durable manufactured goods, or the DMEs, right? The equipment, right? We want this to be like a CPAP machine that the patient takes home with them and has access. So if you have epilepsy, we'd love for this cap to be in your home all the time. And whenever you feel like you need to put it on, you put it on. Or we say we're going to collect it every day during these 5 hours, and that's all we need for you to sit in a chair and watch TikTok for 5 hours and collect this data, right? So that's where we want to move it to. So at that point, that's a different paying model too, right? So we have to figure out who the customer transition is going to be into that space as well. So it's a complex space, but it's one, I go back to the statement that I make, that anything difficult broken down in small enough chunks is not difficult. So taking the approach of talking to identifying or trying to identify the first influencer in the chain will lead you to the second and third and fourth. And if it's not the right first influencer, try again, right? And just keep going down the path.
Thank you so much. That was a great answer.
You're welcome. Other questions? Hey, I'll say it again, right? You're going to leave this meeting and you're going to think about entrepreneurship now for the rest of your life until you jump into it. And you're never going to be able to get out of your head. And if you have questions as you're thinking about the rest of your life as an entrepreneur, send them to us and we'll answer those, right? Obviously I'm being facetious. I don't know if everybody's going to be an entrepreneur for the rest of their life, but maybe tonight you got a little bit better insight of what it takes. And hopefully you got an understanding of where the first steps are to get to something that you need to build out a solution. And hopefully you understand, because we've said it numerous times and we'll keep saying is like, we're here to help, right? This is not just every Thursday night. So send us your stuff. We do all have day jobs. We'll try to coordinate meetings if we need to, but email is great. We'll get back and give you responses. I encourage all y'all to schedule your meetings with your IP holders sometime, today or tomorrow or Monday. Start working on it by Tuesday, hopefully, and then get it to us by the end of the day, Wednesday. As promised, Shelby and I will coordinate getting you all the information you need for all access to the tools that you'll need. And then from there, it's just whatever you need, just ask.
I'm so sorry. I have one more question.
Sure.
Office hours. Is it at a Zoom link? How does that work?
Shelby, how do we have the office hours set up?
So we did last year was people hosted on their own Zoom bridges. So that's probably what the best thing to do is. We would see last year we sent the teams their the Zoom link before office hours started. So I would imagine that's probably how we'll do it this year. Kind of take it upon yourself. So you guys, as you sign up for office hours, should get a link from us, whether that's a Zoom link or whether that's like a phone number. If any of us are on the road and we have a call for office hours too. So we're pretty flexible with it. And also I'll say this too about office hours. I can't speak for everyone, but last year there were a couple of times where Fridays didn't work for some of us to do office hours. And we were pretty flexible with, if you wanted to talk the following Tuesday, we made the time for that too. So, yeah, well, I mean, we're here for you guys, so we can be flexible where needed, but it's probably best to wait for us to send you the Zoom link so we can use our own bridges.
Thank you.
I had a question.
Okay.
Did you have specific format requirements for the problem statement?
I mean, I gave you an example in the deck, right? I mean, that's the structure that I'm just throwing out there as an opportunity or option. You can kind of structure it any way you want. You can bulletize it. You can have the word, who, what, when, why, where as the lead of things. Generally, people put it in those terms like as some sort of contextually paragraphed kind of thing, because that becomes part of the narrative that they talk about, right? If you go back to the example I gave you as I'm reading it out, if I didn't stop and say who and when, but that would be a statement that I could say as an opening to my elevator pitch, right? Or an opening to my deck, right? So we put it in that kind of paragraph form, specifically really to kind of start the way we're going to start talking about it, right? So it's effective if you're moving towards an elevator pitch or a deck, if you kind of put in those terms. But for right now, for this exercise, I care more about those answers to those questions so that we can say, yeah, everything locks in.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. I know we said we're here for y'all, but we do expect y'all to do your own lifting, right? I mean, we're not going to do the work for you, but we've never been asked to do that before, so we're not expecting it here, right? So just make sure we're here for you, but you got some work to do. It's not a great amount of work, and it will never be a great amount of work unless you don't kind of build it along the way and then wait to the end to build the deck, right? And we've seen that before, and we encourage you not to do that, right? So please do the homework because it means something not just to us, but to you and to your deck. I think that's the most important thing I can leave off with. Rohan, Ryan, Shelby, any closing remarks? Nope. Okay. Wow, 7:27, right on the dime almost. Everyone have a great evening. Stay warm, stay dry, whatever it is, wherever you are, and we'll see you next week.
I have a quick question for you.
Go ahead.
I went and looked at the winner of last year's Scipreneur contest, and I was wondering what happened to MetaSense because I couldn't find any information about them.
Go ahead, Ryan.
If you want to find out more, she's probably 10 feet away right now. Let me ask her.
You didn't know Jessica Hughes is Ryan's wife, and she was our winner from last year.
Oh, okay.
She's in the blur back there somewhere.
Because after watching that presentation, I was like, oh, damn, I didn't know that 50% of people were going to have to battle with cancer at some point in their lifetime. And CTCs, this technology seems game changing. So I'd really be interested in following the research.
Yeah, I mean, I can connect the two of you so she can talk more about it offline. Right now, it's not at the stage of commercialization yet. I think it's still in the research stage, but I can also connect you with the researcher at the University of Memphis who's working on it actively, if that's something you're interested in.
Okay. Cool. I just message you my email, and you can just have Jennifer send me an email if that's all right.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, everyone. Have a great evening. Talk to y'all next week.
Hey, Brian, you got a second?
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
1 minute.